Here we have a 2008 Acura MDX, and we're going to do the front brake pads. The front brake pads are the same for 2007 to 2013 for this, so it should be a very easy job. Here's what we're going to need to do the job. Of course, you're going to need some way to jack up the car and safely keep it in the air so it's not going to tip over or fall down. I've got a nice four-way lug wrench. I highly recommend a big four-way lug wrench. And the size we're going to need is the one that says 22 millimeters or 7/8 of an inch. So that's the right one for that. And along with the Acura wheel lock, because they do have an anti-theft lock on there, we're going to need a 17 millimeter socket. You're going to need a big heavy-duty one. I mean, it's going to take some force. I'm using a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, and I couldn't get the bolt off with a 1/2-inch drive ratchet. So you see there's a metal tube next to it to extend the leverage, or you could have a 1/2-inch breaker bar, because you're going to need some leverage to get that thing off. Remember, the amount of force you use taking it off is the kind of force you're going to want to use when you're putting it back on, too. So we got a little wire brush, a little brass wire brush, a flat blade screwdriver, and we got some C-clamps. Now, a 3-inch C-clamp, the smaller one's a 3-inch, and it was just barely big enough. It was kind of a little uncomfortable using the 3-inch. So if you get a 4-inch or larger, here I've got a huge 6-inch, which, you know, the bigger the tool always seems to make the jobs a lot easier. And of course we have our new replacement brake pads. And I've got a little optional, I got a little grease. I like to put grease on all the screw threads, because in another 2 or 3 years or 4 years, I'm going to be the guy doing the brakes again, so I want them to come off. So there you have it, some paper towels, and anyway, this is it, and it only takes a few minutes. I already did the other side, and it's just a really easy job. And be careful, there's another video out there that shows how to replace the calipers and rotors, and they give you the completely wrong information. Now, if you see another video on doing this, do not do what that guy does, because he's telling you the wrong bolts. Let me show you the right way. Okay, step one, while we're still on the ground, is we crack the nuts, because you don't want to be trying to loosen tight nuts while this car's up in the air. It's kind of dangerous, and it's kind of a funny feeling. So while the wheels are firmly on the ground, you give each lug nut half a turn, and then you put it up in the air, and you can take off the wheel. Let's show you where I have a jack to. See how there's a nice big solid frame running all up and down the length of the car, this big solid frame, and it's kind of heavily reinforced right there. That's the jacking point. Got the tire about a 1/2 inch off the ground. We don't want to go much higher than that. You know, make life easy for you, when you're trying to take that wheel on and off. And we'll take off the lug nuts and get rid of the wheel. Got the wheel off, and I want you to take a look at the caliper here. So we can see this caliper kind of floats in this frame here. And when we take the caliper off, I want to give you the right instructions here. So the right instructions are, you see this 17 millimeter bolt here, and the 17 millimeter bolt here. You can see how there's a rubber slide here, those rubber bellows here. You want to take those bolts off and leave the frame behind. Don't take off these 19 millimeter bolts that hold the caliper frame on, because those are the wrong bolts to take off. It's a lot harder when you do it that way. And this thing was designed to have the bolts that go into the slide being taken off. So anyway, I want to give you the right information on the right bolts here. Okay, I got the two 17 millimeter bolts off, and let's see what I can do here with one hand. Let's see if I can get this thing off one hand. Okay, got off, and then we very carefully set up on top here so that we don't harm the hose. We don't want to put any stress on the brake line. We have the caliper off, the brake pads just come out. It's just that easy. And remember, this one with the metal clip is the inboard side, and that goes up next to the caliper. We have the metal clip. So talk about easy. Now we can see on the top and on the bottom here that there's some stainless steel hardware here. And sometimes when you buy brake pads, they give you the new stainless steel glides, but not in my case. So we have to take a little brush and kind of clean these things up a little bit. Get the dust out of here, because the brake pads have to slide along here. And then the caliper floats. You see these rubber bellows? These are kind of make it to where the caliper slides in and out, so that there can only be, so that since there's only pistons on the inbound side, it still has an equal and opposite force on the outbound side. Today I'm going to try the KEF Ultra Quiet Advanced ceramic brake pads. I strongly recommend ceramic. They are much cleaner. You don't get all the brake dust. They work a lot better. These were only $27 of free shipping, and I would have normally gotten the Wagner brake pads that I've had really good luck with at a reasonable price. But there are many more expensive brake pads, and I always wonder whether they're any better. Here's what's inside the box. 4 brake pads. Nicely sealed so they don't bounce around. There's no extra brake hardware included with these. And you can see in the top that there's bits of copper in there, which is pretty standard. I've seen that in a lot of the cheaper ceramic brake pads. Now, they say ceramic, but they don't say non-metallic. So they do have some metal, but they're non-ferrous, because the ones that have the iron in there, make everything black. So these are very typical of medium-priced ceramic brake pads. Okay, here's the old brake pads, and these are the new brake pads. And one thing I want to notice that there's a little thing coming off, and this is on the side that goes to the caliper, or the inbound brake pads have a little guide coming off of them, where the outbound ones do not. So take a look here. You notice this is the original OEM. You notice they have some sort of a metal shim. It just snaps. Here you go. Just snaps off. So that's the metal shim. But the new brake pads have shims pre-bonded. And I've always liked that a lot better. I've always kind of hated these. Sometimes I buy brake pads. They have a shim and you have to stick it on, and it doesn't stay on there very well. So I like having the pre-bonded shim. Got the new brake pads in there. And the trick is you want to put the back end in first so it gets behind here and then slide it forward. So they went in very, very easily. Since the new brake pads are much, much thicker than the old brake pads, we have to compress these pistons in. You see how they're sticking out like like 3/4 of an or 3/8 of an inch. So we have to push those back in, and that's where we're going to use our C-clamp. Let me show you how to do this. Push the cylinder or the caliper pistons all the way in. I use a C-clamp, and like I say, a 3-inch C-clamp isn't going to be big enough if you're going to be using this method. So I take the old brake pad, I have it up there, and that way I push in the old brake pad, and everything's nice and easy, and I don't have to worry about damaging the rubber boot for the caliper, because replacing the caliper get pretty expensive. Pushing the caliper on one side, and the other side wasn't fully in, so I moved the clamp over more, and then I pushed that side in, and now the caliper pistons are fully seated. And now we put the caliper on here. I couldn't do it with one hand, to hold the camera. But basically, you push it on. You have to pull these spring bellows back, because they'll interfere. So you push those so they're out of the way. And you do that on the top and on the bottom, and the caliper goes on very easily as long as the caliper was fully pushed back in. Okay, after we're all done, we get the wheel on here and lower to the ground. Then you make sure you torque all the bolts down to full torque so they don't come off. And then the last step is you check your brake reservoir and make sure that it's not too low. So you can kind of see the level there. It's still, there's a bit of headroom there, but maybe I could top it off just a touch, but you don't need to have much more.